Well, thank you guys for having me today. Again, my name is Amanda Beecham, and just to kind of give you a little bit of background of where I'm at right now, I work at Community Bible Church at CBC. Some people have heard of it, but I work in the early childhood ministry with kiddos 0 to 5, and I also teach a high school Bible study at the moment. Pretty exciting stuff. I'm going to Liberty University as well to become a Christian counselor. That is at least the hope that I will get there. Along this journey that I've gone on, I've heard probably more prevalent than any other question is, how can we hear God's voice? Right? And I know when I first started this journey, that was my question. I asked my dad, how do you hear him? How do you know so clearly that he's telling you? Because I just don't seem to be hearing anything, And the one thing that he told me, he was like, first and foremost, get in the Word. And know the Word, know what He thinks of you, know who He is, know the love He has for you. Get in it. However you got to do that, get in it. And he said, and pray. Pray all the time. Always be in constant communication with God. If you are driving in your car, pray. If you're talking to a friend, pray. If you're disciplining your children, pray. And if you're having a hard time with family, again, pray. Just constantly be in communication with God. And then two, he said, change the music you listen to. Make it to where all day long, that's what you're thinking about is God. That's when you wake up, that's what you're thinking about. And those little changes, they seem so small, but they really do change everything. I remember the day that I heard God, and for me, I had been doing what He said, and I said, that's the best feeling I have ever had in my entire life, to hear Him, to feel His presence, to know that He's there with me. And I told him, I said, this is better than drugs. And he laughed. And when he started knowing that, I'd like to share Isaiah 30:21. It says, if your ears will hear a word from behind, telling you that this is the way, walk in it, when you turn to the right or when you turn to the left. A lot of times it won't be a loud booming voice, it'll be a whisper, so you have to tune the world out a little bit so you can actually hear it. And that's why you got to make Him the center. Again, His voice wasn't always so clear in my life. When I was growing up, my parents were addicts, and we experienced a lot of the things that come along with that. At this point, when I was a child, we experienced poverty. We experienced abuse. I saw a lot of physical abuse, and I myself experienced sexual abuse, a lot of moving and things of that nature, and that was all before I was 12. At 12, I ended up moving in with my grandparents, at which time I started going to church on my own. They didn't go to church. So at 15, I was baptized, and at 18, my grandparents decided to start traveling in an RV. At that point in time, I had kept up the facade for a really long time, that life was good, and I had let things go, and I could move on, and everything was great, but I really hadn't given my life over to God at that point. I was still really struggling with that. So in that, I ended up doing drugs, and I became homeless. I was living in my car, and I was in an abusive relationship. During that time, one of the main verses that always stayed in my head was Matthew 6:26, and it's, look at the birds in the air. They do not sow or reap or stow away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more valuable than they? It was just a simple reminder to me that I had value, I think, at that time, and that even though I was in this really dark spot, that He cared. If I was more valuable than a bird, then He must care about me somewhere, maybe I just can't see it yet. So after this point, my husband and I, we went to high school together, and we got back together, and I was 19 years old. We got married. It was very quick, and within a week, we ended up moving to Kansas because he was in the military. So needless to say, I got rid of my drug addiction, but I switched the addiction to alcohol and cigarettes and things like that, partying. I just went from one thing to the next, trying to fill the void that I had. So needless to say, my marriage was pretty rocky for a while. We went through 3 deployments, and I ended up losing my father about 5 years ago. And at that point, I was about 24, and it was a wake-up call. It was finally that moment where I realized I'd hit rock bottom. I couldn't climb out of the hole I was in, and I really couldn't do it on my own. So at that point, I just began to pray that God would give me wisdom, that He would start to show me how to get to know Him, because as a kid, I knew how to do that. Because I came to Him with a childlike faith, but as an adult who had struggled and seen heartache and pain, I really didn't know what that looked like. So at this point, I'll share the verse. It's James 1:5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to you. I started small. Again, I just started praying. And in that, God led me to start doing Young Life, which is a ministry with high school kids, going into the high schools and speaking with them and doing fun stuff with them, just showing them the love of Jesus. So from there, then God blessed me with my wonderful son, which I had prayed for a very long time, that completely changed my life. Then he led us to San Antonio. We got restationed here and absolutely love it. I've met some of the best people I have ever met in my life here. Then he led us to CBC, where I started doing a high school Bible study for teenage girls. Then it moved on to summer camp. And it moved on to Wednesday night doing stuff with the high school kids, and then now I'm teaching the Bible study in college. So you can see this huge shift. It just took one small step of faith to look at God and to see Him and to trust that even though I didn't really understand, that He would give me the understanding. And so in all of that being said, I want you guys to realize at the end of the day that you do have value and that He does love you, and if you're cherished and He wants to have you in His life. So, if you want to hear His voice, then get in His Word and know what He says about you, and be curious about Him. A lot of people say being a Christian can be boring and things like that, and honestly, it's the best adventure I've ever been on, because I know what my life looks like when I'm in charge, and it's just not that great. I don't know what's coming next. I do know there's some wonderful things around the bend, and I'm so excited for what He has planned, even though I don't exactly know what that is. But I hope and encourage that you would do the same. Change your life 110%. And you won't recognize yourself by the end. I know I don't. I don't look like the girl who lived in my car and was on drugs and I was homeless. He healed my marriage. He healed me from addiction. He blessed me with 2 beautiful children. And it's just been amazing. It's been an amazing journey. So at this point, if you haven't accepted Christ, I do want you to know that there is no magic words. There is nothing mystical about it. It says in Romans 10, 9 through 10, if you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, then you will be saved. No matter where you're at, no matter what you're doing, no matter how old you are or how young you are, you can always come to God, and He, in your brokenness, will heal you. And it's just up to you to take the step and step out in faith and to trust Him. I thank you so much for having me today, and just bless you all through the week. I'll be praying for you all.